The mind-body connection is amazing. Trust it. What emails do you respond to immediately? What emails do you need to think about? What things on your to-do list do you do immediately? What things on your to-do list have been on there for 3 months? What books do you read extra chapters in? What books do you only do the assignment for? These are really important pieces of data that you can combine to come up with a first guess when you're running that simulation model. Younger Crystal needed to know that it was important to define success for herself and not continue working for other people's definition of what success looked like. That's what younger Crystal needed to know.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Being Different Show. Our goal with this show is to introduce you to people and ideas that can help you improve the quality of your life. Our guest today is someone who is a science communicator, STEM ambassador, and a business consultant. She's a molecular neuroscientist and finished a PhD in chemistry from Caltech in 2013. She's a professional ballet dancer and an actress who played the role of Tejel in the PhD movie. She has appeared on several TV shows like one of the most famous Techno, which streams on Al Jazeera American, YouTube's Laugh Fail, The Seeker, and many others. She's known as Dr. Brain, which is a character that she plays on CBS Mission Unstoppable, hereby making concepts of science accessible to literally everyone. She gave an awesome TED Talk, which has received over 140,000 views, wherein she broke the myth who studies science. So, guys, please help me in welcoming the doctor who choreographed Caltech's musical production and is on a mission to help people better understand themselves and the world so that they can become masters of their own destiny. Dr. Crystal Dilworth.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here and just kind of jump into conversation. Obviously, helping people feel more fulfilled and settled in their life is something that I'm really passionate about. So I'm excited to be here.
It's such a pleasure, Crystal, to have you on the show. So, while I was researching about you and listening to your story, I was really fascinated how you did your undergraduation and then you moved to New York for becoming a ballet dancer, and then you eventually did a PhD. So that's like a really, it's like a really interesting start and really interesting transition. So how was it for you, the transition?
I think it's a privilege to have those opportunities. I was a dancer my whole life. Like my dad is a physicist and my mom is a microbiologist. So, and I'm their first child. So they gave birth to this dancer. They didn't understand, like what's going on. They really wanted me to be a scientist. So I was pulling in the dance direction and they were, I don't want to use the word forcing, but strongly emphasizing the science direction. And so I kind of was able to maintain training discipline in both tracks. But of course, when it's time to go to university, you have to choose. So I went to UC San Diego for my biochemistry degree and then would go and dance in the summers. I made the full transition to dancing in New York City when I graduated. And it was amazing. And on one sense, it was everything that I thought it would be. But on the other side of it, it wasn't enough. And maybe it was a little bit of a sense of I was never going to be as good at dance as I wanted to be, or that I had always imagined I was going to be when I was younger. And maybe it was a little bit my father's voice saying, you can do more. But it just wasn't enough. And so, I sought out science. I mean, it's New York City, you can get world quality anything that if you're looking for it. So I reconnected with the chemistry department at Columbia, and then really just paid attention to my own inclinations and what I was feeling. And what I was feeling was, I got to go back to science.
Wow, that's like an incredible transition. And I kind of related to it very much. Back in school, when I used to study science, I used to hate it. But now, I mean, when I graduated out of high school, I've been curious so much about science and our brain and neuroscience stuff that I'm like really diving deep into what researchers are bringing and what all interesting things that we can discover about the brain. So so yeah, that's a like
It,
interesting thing.
it's amazing how motivation works, that sometimes when people are forcing you to prioritize in a certain way, you just want to push back against that, but then left to your own devices, you realize, oh, actually that's pretty interesting. Maybe I'll pursue that on my own. It's a
Mhm.
little bit of what happened with me. I also, the direct connection between what was happening in the lab and what's happening in the scientific community to positive impacts for humanity and for the world around me, I think it was the meaning that I was looking for in my day to day. I mean, I'd been reading PhD comics since I was a junior, in
Wow.
undergrad. I knew that the graduate experience was not all, positive, and that it was, emotionally quite challenging. But I figured, at least when I was getting up in the morning and going to lab, I would be doing something positive, and I would be able to tell myself that, it's in service of better understanding the world, for all of us.
Yeah.
And I think that's what happened.
Damn. So, okay, when a situation like this arises, when you have conflicting interests and when you're doing something, but you're genuinely not interested in that thing, but I mean, you're interested, but you are way more interested in some other thing, right? So there are these voices in our head that keeps on telling us, okay, do this and do that. And so that's like a confused state of mind. So which voice to listen to at that moment of point?
I know it's difficult to hear, but if you are pulled between two distinct specific things and you know what it is you want to do, either this or that, that's amazing. There's so many people that are still trying to find what they're passionate about and find something that is going to matter to them. And I think they're in a much, I mean, they're in a much more emotionally challenging position. I think when it's this or that, you definitely need to take practical considerations into account. Not many of us have the privilege of quitting one job to start a business or to do something else. Money is important. We need to be able to support ourselves. But I truly believe that if you're interested in doing something, the best way to start is to do it for you. So something I often tell students or people I'm mentoring that want to start in science communication: how do I get started? How, like, I really want a job in science communication. It's like, you don't need someone to pay you to communicate science. You can be working your day job, have a podcast, have a blog, start making small bits of content that helps you figure out what it is you really want to do in that space, how you're going to bring unique value to it. And it gives you a little bit of experience. So when you are ready to drop the one thing and focus full time on that second thing, and you'll know when that moment comes, you already have a little bit of experience, and it's not such a leap of faith.
I totally do understand. So this channel started because I wanted to convey all these science concepts in a really interesting way in the form of storytelling. So I brought about these concepts of meditation and juggling and how all of these affect our brain in a positive way. So it started with that, and I totally understand what you when you say, okay, you need to make small bits of progress when to figure out if that's the thing you want to do. So, I mean, but for someone who is like still confused and don't know what he is passionate about, he or she is passionate about, and what they really want to do in their life, how does one figure that out? Figure like considering there are so many options out there, like literally thousands and thousands of options.
I think that the only thing you can do is try a lot of different things. And I don't mean that to be like a random set of experiments, right? Like we take a scientific approach. Every experiment is planned and there's a real purpose to it. So I was kind of feeling like that when I graduated. I didn't know exactly what job I wanted. I was working as a science communicator, but not consistently enough to pay all my bills. Um, and so I needed to push myself in a direction, and I didn't know what that direction was going to be. And so I played actually, I prioritized lifestyle and what was going to make me feel fulfilled. And I don't mean I want a big car. I want a house. But in some case, I don't mean I wanted those things because they were material items to acquire. But I thought about it. Okay, it's Monday morning. I'm waking up. Where am I? What am I doing? Who am I? If I am I going anywhere? So am I waking up in a house, an apartment, or a hotel? Am I working from a home office, or am I getting in a car and driving to an office? Or am I getting in a giant black car that's taking me to the airport so that I can go somewhere? Do I work with a team or do I work by myself? How big is my team? How does my team collaborate? Am I the business owner or am I working in somebody else's business? Just trying to paint a picture of what the first half of a Monday would look like gives you so many different answers. So I knew that I wanted travel to be part of my job. I wanted a close-knit, collaborative team where nobody could do my job and nobody could do your job, but to get, like that Marvel superhero situation, we all have different, superpowers. I knew that I didn't want to commit to one place. So, that means that financially setting myself up to buy a house wasn't the priority, right? So it answered a lot of questions for me. And I looked at everything. And I came up with the idea I was going to be a management consultant, which
Wow.
was an interesting diversion from what I was doing. But I said, okay, it has all these elements I'm looking for. And I studied for the exams and I read all the business management material. And let me tell you, I'm not a management consultant. But what running that experiment did, and when you set up your simulation model, right, and then you run it and you see what happens, going through all of the preparation for an interview and meeting people that were in management consulting led to a now 3-year long relationship with a neuro consulting firm that I work with in Brisbane, Australia. They're neuroscientists, organizational psychologists, and behavioral scientists, and they work with executive teams in business using neuro insights to help these teams function better, work better, and improve their business. And I didn't even know that that existed when I started my journey.
Wow, that's so fascinating. I mean, to think about all of this and how one thing leads to another, and how beautifully life unfolds basically. So, you know, as I was growing up, so I mean, my kind of parental expectations and societal norms kind of nurtured me that I wanted to be an engineer. And I believed it because it was like, okay, everyone's telling around you and you kind of build that beliefs in you. So until class 10, I wanted to be an engineer. But when I started as like looking myself, as you say, imagining yourself, your day job, when I started imagining myself, I was looking, the only thing that I could imagine was sitting at a desk on my computer and doing nothing. So for me, that was pretty scary. And that's when I was like, okay, I want some element of interaction and public speaking in my job. And that's what something I want to do. So for that, I started this channel, and I started a club in my college. It's public speaking club. So so doing what really ignites something in you, I truly understand that. I mean, that's really fascinating. So I mean, one thing, um, when it comes to what we believe at being different. It's like we have infinite potential, nearly infinite potential, and anyone can do literally anything nearly possible on earth. But most people results don't reflect their potential. Why is that?
Oh, this is a incredibly complex question, right? I don't think there's a single answer to that.
Mhm.
I think we get in our own way. I think the societal systems that we're born into, to a certain extent, dictate what our opportunities are. And so some people will have more opportunities to capitalize on than others. Um, and I think that there's an element of individual choice as well. Um, I think you can ask a question, is it our personal responsibility to maximize that potential? Or is it our personal responsibility to ourself to create the situation that is going to make us feel that we've best used our time on earth, right? We only have so many years, conscious years here. And I see that as two paths. Is my responsibility to do absolutely everything that I'm capable of? Or is it my responsibility to make me feel fulfilled and purposeful about what I choose to do? Um, and I actually found the idea of taking the other path quite anxiety producing. And so I've chosen the other way. I have a lot of potential. I could do so many different things, but I choose to do the things that are going to be most rewarding to me, feed back into the communities that I've chosen to identify with, um, and have impact in ways that is going to make me feel good about the work that I do. And so that's what I've chosen personally for me.
That's absolutely fascinating. I mean, in order to be able, so at the end of the day, anything we are doing, uh, we are trying to strive for happiness. At least the society, according to society, we're trying to strive for happiness. And when you find meaning in your work, like that's the best form of happiness, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, well, do you believe that happiness is a constant state?
So, what I think is happiness comes from within, and no external entity can affect your state of internal happiness.
I see it as transient. I think that we can exist. I'm going to use a really nerdy analogy. Okay, everybody stand
I
back.
love nerdy analogies.
It's like different energy, like shells. If you think about an atom and you've got your electrons, and they can exist like at different energy levels, and they're just kind of like bumping between them. I think happiness is one of those higher energy states that we bump up into, but that we don't stay in constantly. And I think that that's okay. Meaning and fulfillment are things that can be constant. Um, and that, yes, we do have to find an internal source for those, but usually we find those through action, through contributing to a group, and to doing the things that our brains are wired to give us positive feedback for.
Absolutely. So, one thing that comes up with any career success that we talk about is mindset and your belief systems. So, what do you think? How does it play any role when it comes to building your own career and constructing your own career from scratch?
I can only speak personally. I mean, I have coached others, but I'm not an expert, on others. I'm an expert on myself. I think mindset has been really critical, and it's something that I've had to build. So I was a very privileged, sheltered child, and I don't mean privileged in that, my family was very wealthy, but I mean privileged in that my family was educated and uh, well off enough that my mom was able to stay home and homeschool me for most of my early age. that meant that my entire environment was curated for me. This does not teach resilience and improvisation, because everything is centered around you always. And if you have a
Wow.
problem, it's quickly fixed, right? And so being on this pattern of everything always being a structured system from before I was born all the way, up until they released me out into the world, which was really undergrad. And
Mhm.
even undergrad, you take your classes, you make your grades, you move on to the next
The
level. It's
transition
still,
might be really interesting for you from homeschool to undergrad.
yeah, it was a lot. And I didn't have the resilience or the flexibility mentally to be able to deal. And that led to a lot of depression. It led to a lot of getting in my own way. And it led to a lot of questions about, like, existential questions, like, who am I really? Am I meant to do the things that people have been telling me? And it's difficult, I think, to be in your early 20s and then suddenly realize you have to find yourself.
Yeah, that's a really confusing state when you are trying to figure out who you are and what you really wanna do, and then you're doing something. So that's kind of a really confusing state. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I think that one of the breakthroughs for me was when I developed the evolution model of personal growth. Like, once I
Mhm.
could tie it, I mean, like, I could tie it to something that I knew, like, I understood the concept of evolution, especially from a genetic perspective, right? You make one small mutation, you run the experiment, you see if it survives. And that's kind of just how I found my resiliency as an adult. I don't assume I have the answers, because that leads to disappointment usually. And so I just try. I run the experiment. I see if it worked for me. And sometimes it moves me forward, like the experiment of what does my Monday look like. And sometimes it doesn't. I took a job as a field producer for actually for Al Jazeera. I field produced one of the episodes of Techno. So when they came to Caltech, I was both a producer and a contributor, like front of the
Whoa.
camera contributor for that. And I realized I did not want that job. Too many things go wrong. There's too many balls in the air, and solving those problems didn't make me happy. So that was a failed experiment, and then I knew I did not have a bright future as a television producer, and I was okay with that.
Wow. I mean, I really like how you relate everything to science experiments. And that's truly fascinating because once you think of life as like different set of science experiments, you need to make sure that you're doing best to make that experiment successful. And you're trying to do the things that you initially thought you are gonna do. So how does one make sure that these experiments are running well, and I mean just getting best out of the experiments that you're running, as you
Oh,
said?
they never run well. They didn't run well for me when I was working in a lab, and they don't run well for me as a human in the world. But that's the point, right? Like, that's the frustrating thing about pursuing science, is that science never works out the way that you want it to. Science works
Mhm.
out the way that the universe works. And that's true whether you're running some type of experiment on a protein, or you're running an experiment on yourself. And I think that's part of the point, is letting go of what you can not control, and choosing to focus on the variables that really matter, that you can control. And identifying those things is the hard thing, right? Because how you respond to negative feedback is what you can control, but getting the
Sure.
negative feedback you can't, right? um, and when you're in a place of fear or uncertainty or anxiety, it doesn't feel like you have choices over how you behave, or what decisions you make. And so trying to lift up, whether that's through meditation, through exercise. Training your brain to push through is the whole point of becoming an adult. And you see adults that aren't able to do that. And so they're older, but they haven't quite gotten to the brain training level that they need to get to. And you see young kids that have experienced a lot of challenges that are able to push through because they don't know any other way, and they have a resilience and a maturity that, you know, people 3 or 4 times their age lack.
Yeah, that's so relatable because I can personally relate to that. And so what do you think about when it comes to this thing called our mind creates our own reality? How much of that is true?
All of it. All of it is true. I'm trying to think of like how to answer that question, because I truly believe that the reality that you're living in and the reality that I'm living in are very different things. But we
Absolutely.
have our senses that are trying to give us the most amount of information to help the predictive machine that is our brain construct the most accurate version of what is really happening. But because we have that filter, I believe truth is something that exists, but that we will never be able to achieve as like individual human organisms. You can get close. It's the whole point with, well, sorry, I just had like a, is American politics about getting closer to the truth? Like just idea float by. I believe that we should be trying to discern and approach the truth, because we can. But I think that there's also others that are interested in exploring just how much of a alternate reality the brain is capable of producing for us. And I guess that's okay too.
Yeah. So while I was watching your conversation with Tom, you said this interesting thing about that while you were growing up, you didn't know how not to do things. And then the only option that was left was like actually doing things and making them happen. So like for anyone who doesn't have that kind of mindset, do you think that really helps, or what role does it play?
I think that this is about how positive and negative suggestions influence our perception of our own abilities. So there's a funny game that you can play, which is, it's like a crossword puzzle, but you finding words within a matrix of random letters.
Mhm.
And you have to find 5 or some number of words, right? And you're timed how long it takes you to find 5 words. And if the words that are embedded in that matrix are negative words, slow, stupid, wrong, lethargic, these types of words, it takes you way longer, like on the orders of tens of seconds longer to find 5 words than if the words that are embedded in that matrix are quick, smart, brilliant, bright. And so that tells me, and this is reproducible like across different languages, across different ages, and that tells me that framing of every interaction, whether it's positive or negative, matters.
Wow. Yeah, that's like saying our worlds exist inside our own heads, and it's how you choose to see your world is how you will see your world.
Yeah. But imagine the energy that you would have to put in if you were in an environment where every single thing, the system, the people you interacted with, the work that you were doing, all told you that you were useless, that your life had no meaning, and that you would never amount to anything. Think of
Mhm.
the amount of energy that you would have to put into the system to overcome that. You're
Absolutely.
not just fighting other people, you're fighting what that's doing to your own perception of your situation. Even if you're the most optimistic person,
Mhm.
the energy into the system to create change or to shift yourself out of that situation is so much greater than if you were surrounded by an environment that said, all you have to do is try.
And yeah, I have personally seen in my life how that affects when you create the environment, even when you're trying to build habits. And when you set your room in such a way that it kind of anchors you and kind of brings back the initial motivation that you had while building habits, that the environment plays a really important role there.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, anyone that's gone away to college, gotten their own life, their own friends, discovered new aspects of their personality, started dressing in a way that they think, more accurately reflects them, and everything is going well. And then you go home for break, and suddenly your parents and your siblings and everyone is treating you like you were the person that they knew, right? And we all fall we all fall back into old behavior patterns. We let go some of those adult behaviors that we were starting to develop, and we fall back into, she's breathing on me. or or something like that, or arguing with your parents about whether or not you can take the car.
Yeah, that kind of changes your perception of reality when you've been in an environment where things were way too different back like than in your home.
Yeah, actually, I think that we're going to see a lot more of environment design being a part of the future. I mean, in the past, we've been talking about how environments and buildings can, be functional and can be aesthetic. But I think, especially with 2020 showing us all how much our home work environments impact our own mood and our productivity, I think we're going to see a lot more people trying to use what we know about the science of human performance and what we know about behavioral science to build environments that skew towards certain behaviors. So there's already a few projects like this. Some people call it biophilic design. There's also lots of different buzzwords. Everyone's trying to label it for themselves. But, how do you build when we're going back to the office? How do you build an office that serves the new function? Because productivity is no longer the function. We can go home and we can work at home and do those things. The office is supposed to serve the function of connection, collaboration, and forming trust, which, there's just some deals that can't be done unless you can look someone dead in the eye in person and shake their hand. And that's, I think, what the office, for instance, is going to start doing for businesses. And how do they build systems for that instead of, bunch of rat cubicles for people to just type?
Yeah. And when the topic of about like designing your environments come up, I just cannot resist but telling you that I used to do it without any intention. I didn't know of it that I was doing, but I used to keep my phone in my cupboard and lock it and keep the keys under the door mat, right? So that was so when I wanted to focus on something, I used to do that, and that kind of included decision point, so that every time I wanted to check my phone and use social media, I was actually thinking, okay, do I really want to or do I not? So I like even small little nudges can like drastically change how you design your environment and how you behave in a particular environment. So
Yeah,
I totally
absolutely.
agree with that.
Oh, you're so brave.
Yeah, thank you. So, so Crystal, for anyone, I mean, this is the last question I'm going to ask, and it's imagine that you are in your college years, in your late teens, and you're enjoying life and being younger Crystal. What is that one thing that you would tell younger Crystal that you know now?
I'm going to give you two answers. Younger Crystal needed to know that it was important to define success for herself and not continue working for other people's definition of what success looked like. That's what younger Crystal needed to know. I think an additional thing that would be important for people at that stage in general to know that might have those questions about what am I going to do with my life and how do I make sure that I'm happy with what I'm doing. The mind-body connection is amazing. Trust it. What emails do you respond to immediately? What emails do you need to think about? What things on your to-do list do you do immediately? What things on your to-do list have been on there for 3 months? What books do you read extra chapters in? What books do you only do the assignment for? These are really important pieces of data that you can combine to come up with a first guess when you're running that simulation model.
Wow, that's beautifully put. Thank you so much, Crystal. This was wonderful, lovely conversation, and I really appreciated your insights on everything that you said. Wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for having me. These are my favorite topics, so I could talk forever about them. And I hope I was able to give some at least personal insights that would be helpful.
Hey everybody, thanks for watching. If you liked the episode and found it helpful, do share it with your friends. And if you haven't already, do subscribe to the channel by clicking the red button below and turn on the notification icon so that you never miss out any update. See you later, and till then, stay awesome.